Amen. Well, get your scriptures out. Forgot to. If you want to, let's all move over on this side, just in case it gets the crowd with the camera. They can see we got people here. Oh, Maine. Well, did y'all get any snow where you were? No snow where you were? Anywhere you were? Little flurries here. Last night. And snowed in Dallas. And about as far as Hillsboro. And so that was interesting. But not here. Just little flurries. Did freeze. But that's about it. Amen. As I had said last week, I wanted to, in our study on the tabernacle, I wanted to take you to a day in the Holy Tabernacle. So beginning at the night watch. If night has indeed begun to wane, the watchman cries out, Barkai, the day has dawned. But if it's still too early to commence with the daily sacrifice, after the initial declaration of Barkai, signaling the first moments of the day, the priest must wait for the second announcement. He, in the high place, will call out, the entire eastern horizon is illuminated. Like some consecrated and rarefied code whose inner meaning is known to but a chosen few, the exchange continues between the watchman at his elevated station and those below in the courtyard of the tabernacle. The feelings of anticipation swell within the priestly circle as these men whose lives are sanctified to Yahweh wait for the first possible moment for the honor of fulfilling His will. Once the eastern sky begins to shimmer, one of those down below will call up to the colleague, does the glow extend all the way to Hebron? Yes, the night watchman replies. The sages of the Jerusalem Talmud stated that the true design behind this part of the exchange was simply to mention Hebron, the city of the patriarchs of the Israelite people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For the very name Hebron is in itself synonymous with these righteous spiritual giants who are buried there in the Ma'arat ha-Meshpach-Pilah, the famed double cave which Abraham purchased from Ephron the Hivite in Genesis 23. The name Hebron is derived from the Hebrew word chaver, which means friend. For Abraham was the beloved of Yahweh, the first true believer who blazed a trail for every spiritual seeker who would follow in his footsteps and likewise embark upon a quest for a relationship with the one true Elohim. As Ezekiel testifies, Abraham was the one in Ezekiel 33:24. The lives led by these great men were so virtuous that their merit lives on forever, as echoed by the sages of the Talmud in Barkot 18a, who enigmatically stated that even in death the righteous are called alive. To invoke their name, to allude to their identity, even to mention the name of the city in which they lie, is to recall their merit before the Holy One. Does the glow extend all the way to Hebron? That merit is strong enough to provide a protection and grace for their children forever. And yes, replies the night watchman, it extends all the way to Hebron. Morning has broken. Once the priest actually did make a mistake in determining the day's commitments, and the daily sacrifice was offered too early. The Mishnah in Yoma 2:2 relates that upon that occasion, it was a cloudy day towards the end of the month, In the Hebrew month, the lunar months are observed. At the end of the month rises in the sky at the close of dawn. The moon's light, which broke through the clouds and lit up patches of the sky, gave the impression that the dawn was at hand and that the eastern sky was aglow with the sunrise. The daily Tamid offering was slaughtered, and afterwards the priest realized that this had been done while it was yet night and was therefore invalid. So they had to start the process all over again. Once it had been established that the proper time has come for the offering, the Tamid daily sacrifice, and the gates of the sanctuary are open, the overseer instructs the priest who will be attending to the service, bring a lamb from the sheepfold. Now the sheepfold was the tabernacle's store of lambs. At all times, a minimum of 6 animals previously checked and certified as blemish-free were kept here for the daily sacrifices. It was required that each lamb be checked 4 days in advance of being sacrificed. Although the lamb which had been selected for the Tamid sacrifice had already been ascertained as being free of any disqualifying blemishes, nonetheless, as an added precaution, since the Torah strongly prohibits the offering of blemished animals, after it has been selected, the lamb is given to drink before it is slaughtered, for this makes its skin easier to remove. It is watered from a golden vessel. Everything done in the tabernacle was always conducted with as much honor as possible. This sheepfold was located in the northwest corner of the tabernacle. The tent of the bread of the presence. This is where those who made the bread of the presence kneaded and baked the dough. It was located in the southeast corner of the place of fire. After selecting a lamb from the sheepfold, the Kohanim, or the priest, entered into the tent of vessels, where all the tabernacle vessels were stored. There they removed all the sacred vessels of bronze, silver, and gold, which they will require to conduct all the aspects of the divine service during the course of the day. Now the priest who received first place in the lottery, and thus the right to slaughter the Tamid, leads the lamb to the area of the court north of the altar. He's allowed by the 6th priest, or he's followed, by the 6 priests who will actually bring the parts of the sacrifice up to the altar's ramp. This slaughtering area was especially equipped. It featured a wooden brace called the hands of Yah that held the lambs, preparing them for the offering on the altar. While the Tamid is going on, other aspects of the divine service are transpiring. Other activities which had been awarded by the 2nd lottery began as well. Once the gates of the sanctuary have been opened, the other priests on staff who are involved in separate aspects of the morning service may commence with their tasks. The Aaronic priest, who is to attend the incense altar's ashes, now enters into the sanctuary. Straight through the open gates, he carries the golden basket and makes his way into the holy place, standing before the golden incense altar. He first places the basket down on the sanctuary floor. Then he removes excess ashes from the incense altar into his 2 palms, and transfers these ashes into the basket before him. When only a small amount of the ashes were left over, and the contents could not be gathered up into the palms in this manner, he uses a small brush to sweep them straight into the basket. Concluding, he left the basket on the floor before him and exited. The basket would not be removed until later on in this service. At the same time, the Aaronic priest who has been assigned the next tasks enters into the sanctuary in the same manner and approaches the menorah, which stands in the south side. This priest now attends to the service of the menorah. Now you might notice that the menorah in the tabernacle looks uniquely different than the menorah in the temple. The menorah in the temple has bent limbs, whereas the tabernacle has straight limbs, making it more tree-like. So this priest now attends to the service of the tabernacle menorah. Now, I want to stop here just a second and tell you, never has the tabernacle menorah ever been stolen. It is still where it is, located in the secret chamber of the caves where Jeremiah hid it, and it is still waiting to be restored and used at the end of days. It was the menorahs of the Herod's temple that were stolen by the Romans, and it was Solomon's menorah that was stolen by the Babylonians. But the tabernacle furniture has never been stolen. We still have that furniture. It is most holy unto Yahweh. The priest now attends to the service of the menorah, which consists of removing used residue of spent wicks and oil from the individual lamps and preparing new wicks to be kindled. He must also replenish the full measure of oil for each light, which is a half of a lug. In order to accomplish his task, the officiating priest must stand at eye level so that he may work effectively, cleansing the lamps, placing new wicks, and lighting them. But at 18 hands' breadth, the menorah stands quite high. The priest ascends by way of 3 marble stairs, which stood in front of the menorah, and led up to where he could be level with the lamps, standing on the highest of these steps. These 3 steps are called the steps of ascension. These 3 steps correspond to 3 scripture verses which mention going up in relation to the menorah. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aharon and say to him, when you raise up the lamps, the 7 lamps shall illuminate the menorah." Numbers 8:1. "And you shall make it 7 lamps, and you shall cause its lamps to rise so that they shall shine towards its center." Exodus 25:37. "And you shall command the children of Israel to bring you clear illuminating oil made from hand-crushed olives to raise up a constantly burning lamp." Exodus 27:20. From scriptural exegesis, the sages derived that when attending to the improvements of the 7 flames, the priest does not adjust all 7 lamps at once. Rather, he must divide this task into 5 and 2 upon entering the sanctuary. If he finds that the 2 eastern lamps, that is, the 2 flames on the eastern side, are still burning, in that case he attends to the other 5, cleaning out the ashes and filling them with new oil and wicks. He places the refuge with the other into the golden basket. Even if he enters to find that the other 5 flames are still burning from the previous day, he extinguishes them and replaces their oil and wicks, and then rekindles them. This is the service known as improving the 5 flames. He leaves off the other 2 lamps for now, allowing them to burn as they were. After the blood of the daily sacrifices has been tossed on the altar, he will return to the sanctuary to likewise attend to these 2 lamps in the same fashion. 1 flame of the menorah, the western lamp, burned perpetually. This candle was never extinguished, for the other flames were kindled from its fire. Concerning this flame, the verse states, "Raise up a constantly burning lamp," in Leviticus 24:2-3. This is the 2nd flame from the end on the eastern side. It is related that until the death of the high priest Shimon HaZaddik, this flame burned constantly in miraculous fashion, which demonstrated to the world that the divine presence dwelt amongst Israel. In the Talmud, Shabbat 22:2. Rava said, "What is meant by the words in Leviticus, outside the curtain of the testimony? The western candle is the testimony, for it was filled with the same amount of oil as the others, but it is not extinguished." If the priest finds that the 2 eastern lamps have gone out, he prepares them for rekindling and lights them from the other flames. And if he should ever find that all the flames have been extinguished, he relights these two from the fire atop the altar, and then kindles the remaining 5 before leaving the sanctuary. He leaves the basket on the second step before the menorah, and then departs. At this time, the daily sacrifice is slaughtered. At this point, the Tamid daily sacrifice is slaughtered, and the next 6 Aharonic priests then merit to bring various parts of the sacrifice up to the altar ramp. The 7th priest brings the fine flour for the meal offering, which accompanies the daily sacrifice. The 8th priest, who is the 12th in the lottery, merits to bring the high priest's personal meal offering up to the altar. This meal offering consists of 1/10 of an ephah, approximately 2 quarts, of flour mingled with oil in a pan and baked into 12 loaves. Although this was the high priest's own, it is considered in many ways like a congregational offering. It was brought to the altar every day, half in the morning and the remaining half in the evening. Some say that this meant 6 loaves were offered in the morning and 6 in the evening. Other scholars opine that the loaves were broken in half, with the first half being offered in the morning and the remaining half in the evening. Incidentally, this offering is also brought by every priest who begins to officiate in the tabernacle on the first day of his service as part of his inauguration ceremony. The ordinary or lay priest only brought it on the day they took office, but the high priest would bring this offering every day. It is described in Leviticus 6, where we read, "And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, This is the offering that Aharon and his descendants must bring on the day that any one of them is anointed. It shall consist of 1/10 of an ephah of wheat meal, and it will be a daily meal offering with 1/2 in the morning and 1/2 in the evening. Like every meal offering brought by a priest, this was required to be completely burned on the altar and not eaten," according to Leviticus 6:15-16. Once all the parts of the sacrifice and the meal offering have been placed on the altar, they are salted, as Yahweh commanded, or Elohim commanded. You shall offer salt on all your sacrifices. Leviticus 2:13. The last priest in this lottery receives the task of bringing the 1/4 hin, approximately 1 quart, measurement of wine, which is poured out on the altar for the morning wine libation that accompanies the daily sacrifice. Thus, a total of 13 priests receive appointments of divine service in the second daily lottery. The entire staff needed to offer the daily sacrifice is now in place, and after these priests conclude their tasks, they return to the sanctuary for the recitation of their morning prayers. May the daily sacrifice be found acceptable before you, O Yahweh. Upon returning to the sanctuary, the lottery overseer instructed the priests that it was time for the morning oblation to recite the Shema, Hear, O Israel prayer. Together with its corresponding blessing, they also recited the 10 Commandments, since these embody the main principles of the Torah, according to Rambam. After both the daily sacrifice and the incense offering are concluded, the priests will raise aloft their hands and deliver the priestly blessing upon the congregation of Israel assembled around the holy tabernacle. In the meantime, they now recite these abbreviated prayers, as it was the most fitting for those who have engaged in offering the daily sacrifices to now beseech Elohim that the sacrifice should be pleasing before him, accepted, and looked upon with favor. The third lottery was unique. This was held to determine who would have a chance to officiate at the incense offering, which according to the Zohar in 1:130a was the most beloved part of the tabernacle service in Yahweh's eyes. It was influential in subduing evil, and its characteristic quality aided in amplifying the aspect of divine mercy and benevolence in the world. So you're getting a unique ministry tonight. Yahweh loves the incense. Central to all the ceremonies conducted in the tabernacle was the Ketoret Basamim, or the incense offering. Yahweh said to Moses, "Take fragrant spice gum resin, onycha and galbanum, and pure frankincense, all in equal amounts, and make a fragrant blend of incense, the work of a perfumer. It is to be salted and pure and sacred. Grind some of it to powder and place it in front of the testimony in the tabernacle of meeting, where I will meet with you. It shall be most holy to you. Do not make any incense with this formula for yourself. Consider it holy to Yahweh." Exodus 30, 34 through 37. The incense which was offered in the tabernacle was made from 11 different ingredients, only 4 of which are mentioned by name in the verse above. The identity of the other 7 spices were known to the priests. After treating and grinding each separately, they were blended together into a special mixture to be used in the temple and the tabernacle. The priest then approached the golden incense altar. Once he was there, he opened up the bowl on top of the altar. All the ingredients surrounded that bowl. He put the coals in, the coals from atop the altar that was already lit by Yahweh. And then he began to add the incense ingredients. If he did things right, then it rose straight upward and filled the sanctuary. Incense is supposed to be a token of gladness. As it is written, "Oil and incense rejoice the heart." Proverbs 27 and 9. Therefore, when he lit the menorah, the priest used to offer incense, as it says, "When he dresses the lamps, he shall burn incense on it. And when Aharon lights the lamp at evening, he shall burn incense upon it." Exodus 30, 7-8. In the morning he burns incense because of the joy brought by our Heavenly Father, as morning is a time of joy. And in the evening he burns incense to bring joy to Yahweh. Incense is ever a sign of joy. An extraordinary tradition relates that because it was so beloved to the Creator, he sought to reward those who attended to it in an unusual fashion. Listen to this, Richard. Whose effects were manifest immediately. Whoever officiated in the incense offering became wealthy and enjoyed the blessing of heaven. The heavens sent bounty and prosperity from then on. This concept is also reflected by the verse in Deuteronomy 33, 10-11. They shall put incense before you, bless Yahweh his substance, and accept the work of his hands. The incense service is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thus, in order to give all priests an opportunity to avail themselves of this divine blessing, and so that no man should monopolize such favor by receiving it more than once, it was established that unlike the other aspects of the tabernacle service, each priest may officiate at the incense offering only once, and afterwards he may not apply again. The priests who arrive at this third gathering knew that if they merit to perform this service, it will be an opportunity they shall have just once in a lifetime, for the winner will not even be allowed to participate in the drawing again. According to the Mishnah, the overseer of the lotteries would cry out, "Newcomers only. Whoever has never once offered the incense, let him come and draw lots." The Talmud expounds on this and states emphatically that in all the hundreds of years that the Holy Temple stood, no man ever repeated the incense service. This fact in itself translates into an amazing detail. There were so many priests in each family clan that a lottery gathering never once took place, and this scene was replayed every day over many hundreds of years, wherein everyone present had already performed this service. The fourth lottery was once again open for the participation of all priests. In fact, states the Mishnah, since it follows the incense drawing, which was only eligible to newcomers. By contrast, the overseer of this lottery would now cry out, "Both newcomers and veterans alike, let all come to draw lots." The priest who now wins the fourth lottery is he who will actually bring these segments up to the altar. Some claim that the same number of priests who brought the portions over to the ramp, 6, now bring them up as well. He who merits to perform this task places the portions on the altar's fire and pours out the accompanying libations as well. When the priests all arrived in the early morning to participate in the lotteries, they were all attired in priestly vestments. In the event of meriting in the lottery, each would be able to commence with the sacred task immediately. But when the last lottery had been concluded, all those priests who did not receive any task in any of the lotteries now removed their priestly garments and present them to the official in charge of the uniforms to be put away. The priests do this in the most modest fashion. They remove their sanctified garments without removing the pants, and put their own ordinary clothes on over the holy pants. Then they remove the priestly pants from underneath and replace them with ordinary pants. This way their immodesty was never exposed. The priestly clothes are then placed into windows, special cubbyholes, lockers, which were reserved for the effects of the members of each shift. Each window was labeled pants, turbans, and etc., so that the items would be stored separately and not in a jumble. Then they returned the vessels to the tent of vessels. The priest who has received the task of offering the incense now takes up the special vessels of the incense service, a large golden spoon which holds the amounts of 3 kavim, and a smaller vessel filled to the brim with the incense, and placed inside the larger vessel. This prevented any of the incense from spilling. It is also the turn of he who received the task of the shovel to now bring the shovel of coals to the inner altar within the sanctuary for the burning of the incense. First he must take up a silver shovel and ascend to the top of the outer altar, where he will stir the coals to and fro and take some of the burning coals into the shovel. Rabbi Yehuda says, the priest who has merited the incense service exclaims to the other who stands to his right at the time of the lottery, "You have merited along with me the service of the shovel," says the Talmud, Yoma 25b. This priest now takes the silver shovel up to the outer altar, as described above. When he descends with the coals, he transfers them into the golden shovel, and it is this one that he will take into the sanctuary for the incense service. The 2 priests who will offer the incense and he who bears the shovel now make their way together towards the sanctuary. But before arriving there, in between the hall and the altar, one of them takes a vessel called the magrefa and throws it down on the floor. The sound made by the magrefa falling was so deafening at that moment that in the entire camp no one could hear his friend speaking. Throwing down the magrefa was a signal which served 3 purposes. 1, at the sound the priests were about to prostrate themselves before the divine presence, and all ran to bow down with them. 2, at the sound the Levite choir entered the court to begin their service of the daily song. They too ran to join their brothers. 3, at the sound the head elder separated the priest who had become defiled and stood them at all the eastern gate. This way everyone could see that they were impure and therefore could not serve in the holy temple or tabernacle, and no one would suspect that they had any other reason for not participating in the service. These 2 priests now continue up the 12 steps that led to the sanctuary. They are preceded by 2 other priests, and those who received the task of removing the residue ashes from both the incense altar and the menorah. He whose job was the altar's ashes enters first. Using the edges of the shovel, he arranged the coals upon the altar evenly, so that the incense will burn well. He then takes up the basket which he left there earlier, prostrates himself, and exits, having concluded his task. He is followed by the priest who improves the menorah's wicks. He now enters, And if he finds the two easterlymost candles still burning, he extinguishes the outside flame so that he may replenish its oil and replace its wick, and then relight it. But he does not extinguish the western candle, the second flame from the end. This flame he allows to burn continuously, the perpetual flame. And from this he will rekindle the menorah in the evening. If he should find that the western candle had gone out, he then cleanses its lamp as well, replenishing its oil and wick, and rekindles its light from the fire atop the outer altar. Afterwards he takes up the vessel containing the menorah's refuse, which he had left earlier on the second step. He prostrates himself once and departs the sanctuary. The priest who attends to the incense service now enters into the sanctuary together with one colleague who will assist him. He removes the smaller vessel filled with the incense and hands it to his companion. The latter deposits some of the incense into the palm of the priest. As mentioned, the incense service only came about once in each priest's life. Therefore, the priest who will now officiate has no prior experience. Before he entered, he was warned that he must be very cautious when placing the incense upon the burning coals. If he sprinkles it on the coals too close to the side where he's standing, he will be burned. He is instructed that he must sprinkle it with a motion moving away from himself. When he receives word from the overseer that he may now begin, the priest begins to let the grains fall from his palms upon the top of the altar, slowly, like one who sifts flour, according to Rambam. When the entire chamber fills with the cloud of smoke, he prostrates himself and exits the sanctuary. After the priests have concluded their sacred duties within the sanctuary, bowed down and departed, they exit the sanctuary and stand upon the 12 steps which lead down to the area before the altar. The priest who attended to the inner altar's ashes, the menorah's wicks, the shovel, and the incense, all stand to the right of their colleagues, who brought the parts of the sacrifice up to the altar. They hold all the vessels they have been using in their service, the golden baskets which hold the ashes and the wicks, the shovel, and the incense utensils. Now they place these vessels down and face the congregation, turning towards all the people who've gathered in the court. They extend their hands and they recite the priestly blessing. May Yahweh bless you and keep you, keep his watch over you. May Yahweh make his presence enlighten you and grant you grace. May Yahweh direct his providence towards you and grant you peace. The priest will place my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them, says Numbers 6:38 through 42. Rambam states, and I quote, "The tribe of Levi is completely separated and designated for the service of the holy temple, as the verses testify in Deuteronomy 10:8. At that time Elohim designated the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of Elohim's covenant, to stand before Elohim and serve him, and to offer blessings in his name. It is for this reason that Levi was not given any portion or inheritance along with his brethren. Elohim is his heritage, and Elohim promised him." The scriptures state that they, the Levites, shall be your associates, and they shall be entrusted with responsibility for the communion tent, according to Numbers 18:4. It is a positive commandment for the Levites to be available and prepared to carry out the service of the tabernacle. Unoccupied with other pursuits, their tasks are divided. Some guard over the tabernacle, some over the gatekeepers, opening the tabernacle doors at the start of the daily sacrifice and locking them at the close of the day. With these words, Elohim instructed Aharon in the commandment of establishing watches in the holy place. Unlike ordinary guard stations or checkpoints, these watches were not for the purpose of guarding against intruders such as enemies or robbers, but rather to glorify the honor and dignity of the house of Elohim. If one would not expect to find the palace of an ordinary king or nobleman to be left without an honor guard, how much more so would such a practice be befitting and proper in the house of the Creator himself, the living Elohim of Israel. These watch stations were manned around the clock. Altogether, watches were kept in 24 locations throughout the Holy Tabernacle and Temple. The majority of these, 21, were manned by the Levites and 3 by priests. Tractates Talmud and Midot enumerate the locations of these various watches throughout the tabernacle and the temple, and most of the information in this chapter is based on information contained therein and expounded upon by various commentators of the oral traditions. The sages of the Mishnah in Midot 1-2 provide a vivid description of the nightly routine of these watches. Each night, the supervisor of all the watches patrols the tabernacle grounds, inspecting each and every watch. Burning torches are borne before him in order for the guards to recognize that it is he. And if perchance he encounters a watchman who does not rise up before him, the supervisor cries out to him, "Shalom Aleichem!" But if the supervisor receives no reply, it is obvious that the guard has been caught asleep. He would then rap the sleeping Levite with his stick. The supervisor was even empowered to set his covering on fire as a punishment for not carrying out his duty properly. Everyone within earshot who heard the cries of the unfortunate sleeper would say, "What is that noise in the court?" "Oh, it is the sound of a Levite who has been rapped and his covering set alight, for he has fallen asleep on his watch." Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, a contemporary of that era, and the author of the tractate Midot, related that once my mother's brother was found sleeping and his covering was singed. The 3 locations where the priest stood watch were the place of the incense, the place of the spark, and the place of the fire. The first 2 locations were tents at the side of the court. In the place of incense, the incense which was offered up on the golden incense altar in the sanctuary that was prepared, the priests who were entrusted with the sacred task of compounding the ingredients and creating the incense for the service. According to the descriptions in the Jerusalem Talmud, this place was located on the south side of the court. The place of the spark was located in the north of the court. Here a small fire was kept burning to provide the fire which burned perpetually atop the altar. The place of the fire was likewise situated on the northern side, where a great fire was kept burning here all the time, so the officiating shifts of priests could warm themselves around it, as they performed their task barefoot and constantly bathed themselves. You can imagine in the wintertime that got kind of cold, so they kept that fire burning. It couldn't be just any fire. It had to be holy fire for them too, because they're in a state of sanctification. Now, night in the holy temple, you had to have sleeping arrangements. So immediately around the tabernacle were the tents of the priests. For those on duty in the tabernacle, like the priestly dormitory, the families were responsible for the next day's service. Come morning light, would sanctify themselves and sleep in a separate tent the night before. Now, to accompany all this, in the outer court, there was a Levitical choir. Although the Levites sang upon many occasions in the tabernacle, one of their most important basic musical tasks was the daily song. Each day, the Levite choir stood atop the platform located in the outer court and sung a special song for that particular day. On the festivals and new moon, different songs were sung. All of these songs, with their instrumental arrangements, were performed while the morning and evening wine libations were poured out on the altar by the officiating priests. Thus the Levites accompanied the divine service of the priests with a service of their own. They complemented each other in many ways. The Levitical songs were as important a tabernacle function as the priestly service of the sacrifices itself, for the one could not function without the other. Each day during the wine libations, the overseer of the choir stood atop one of the horns of the altar and signaled to the Levites with a kerchief in his hand to begin their song. At 3 points in their song they would pause. When the priest would sound the silver trumpets and all the people in the court prostrated themselves before the presence of Yahweh. The order of the daily songs have a deep significance, and there is a mystical connection which each song had for the particular day that it was sung. The oral traditions has preserved the listing of the Levitical songs that were sung each day in the holy temple or tabernacle, and various commentators and sages have explained some of the connections which can be seen between the songs and the day of the week. And this is based on the Talmud, Tamid 7 and 4. On the first day of the week, they sang Psalms 24, which begins with, "The earth is Yahweh's and the fullness thereof." For the first day is the first day of creation, and on this day Yahweh acquired heaven and earth for himself and established sovereignty over his world. On Monday, the second day of the week, they sang Psalms 48, which begins with, "Great is Yahweh, and greatly to be praised in the city of our Elohim, in the mountain of his holiness." It was on this day that the waters were divided, and a firmament was put into place between the upper and lower waters, according to Genesis 1, 6-7. The rabbis explained that this psalm was chosen for this day because Yahweh departmentalized his creation and reigned over it. You can see that in the Psalms in its entirety. On the third day of the week, the Levites sang Psalms 82, beginning with the words, "Elohim stands in the congregation of Elohim. He judges amongst the judges." For on this day of creation, the dry land became visible. Upon this land, the judges stand to render their decisions. As the sages put it, Elohim caused the land to be revealed through his wisdom, and thus preparing the world for his congregation. On the fourth day of the week, they sang Psalms 94, which begins with, "O Yahweh Elohim, to whom vengeance belongs, O Elohim, to whom vengeance belongs, shine forth." This was the day wherein the sun, the moon, and the stars were created, and in the future he will exercise judgment and exact vengeance upon those idolaters who worship these heavenly bodies as if they were gods themselves. On the fifth day of the week, they sang Psalms 81, beginning with, "Sing aloud to Elohim our strength. Make a joyful noise to the Elohim of Jacob." The living creatures were created on this day, and one who sees these creatures gives praise to their Creator. For truly, when a person perceives the myriad variations and diversity of Elohim's handiworks, he is filled with awe and wonder at his great wisdom. On the sixth day of the week, the Levites sang Psalms 93, which begins with, "Yahweh reigns, he is clothed in majesty." Creation was crowned and completed on this day, the last of the original 6 days of creation. Today man was created, and only he can recognize Elohim's true greatness. Of all the vastness of creation, man alone has the capacity to understand the Creator's rulership and accept it upon himself to be the king's subjects. On the holy Sabbath, the Levites sang a psalm for the Sabbath day, Psalms 92. The sages of Israel taught that this psalm is a song for the future rectified world, the day which is complete Sabbath tranquility for everlasting life. The Talmud explains this according to a deeper understanding. The world was only created with the intention that it was to last for 6,000 years, and in the 7,000th year it would be destroyed, at which time only Elohim himself would remain. This mystery is alluded to by Isaiah the prophet in Isaiah 2:12, "As Yahweh alone shall be exalted on that day." This song was sung with reference to the Sabbath day, the 7th 1,000-year period. For one day of the Holy One is like 1,000 years, according to Psalms 90 and 4. The Zohar teaches that every day the Levite song corresponds to the 6,000 years of creation. The first day corresponds to the earth's first 1,000 years, when the earth was complete in its fullness. This was the time until the flood, when humanity enjoyed the full benefit and pleasure of the earth's bounty. Therefore the Levites sang, "The earth is Yahweh's and the fullness thereof." On the second day of the week, the Levites sang, "Great is Yahweh and highly to be praised in the city of our Elohim, in the mountain of his holiness." For it was during this historical period that Mount Moriah was chosen by Yahweh to rest his holy presence amongst mankind forever. The third day song was, "Elohim stands in the congregation of the Elohim, and he judges amongst the judges." For it was in the world's third 1,000-year period that Elohim presented the Torah to Israel and rested the divine presence in their midst. On the fourth day the Levites sang, O Yahweh Elohim, to whom vengeance belongs, O Elohim, to whom vengeance belongs, shine forth. For this day corresponds to the epoch when the temple was destroyed, and the Holy One was vowed to bring his vengeance upon those who were responsible. The fifth day's song was, Sing aloud to Elohim our strength, make a joyful noise to the Elohim of Jacob. For during this entire 1,000 years Israel was without the holy temple. No means of serving Elohim remains for her save singing. On the sixth day Elohim alone will reign, and the kingdom will be his, and the holy Sabbath, which is sanctified by Elohim and sacred to Israel, is an allusion to the 7,000 year, the future rectified world. These songs and the lore surrounding them deserve to be examined in greater detail, for they constitute an entire treaty of study in their own right. While this is not the place for such a treatment, we can already sense that they are replete with meaning and significance, and that each song is inexorably connected to its corresponding day by an intricate web of thought and symbolism. It is fitting that we conclude our study with one particular midrashic teaching that deserves our particular attention. The second holy temple, like the first, was destroyed at the conclusion of the Sabbath at Havdalah. Both Josephus and the midrashic writings describe how even though the flames of destruction raged all around and the blood of the slain flowed through the temple, and the priests nevertheless continued to serve atop the altar, and the Levites did not cease to sing right up until the very end. Yet despite the fact that the actual destruction of the holy temple took place on a Saturday night, the Midrash records that at those moments the Levites sang the song for Wednesday. O Yahweh Elohim, to whom vengeance belongs, O Elohim, to whom vengeance belongs, shine forth. Why did they not sing the song for that day of the week, which was Saturday? Now, according to the insight from the Zohar, which we have quoted above, we can understand that the Levites were addressing their song to the destruction itself and consoling Israel by reminding her that Elohim has sworn vengeance against his enemies. In this context, perhaps their song was even meant to remind Elohim to keep his word and to shine forth at the proper time to manifest himself in the garb of divine vengeance. But now that we have examined the close relationship between each day of the week and its respective song, and seen something of the great insight and understanding which the sages of Israel possess, perhaps we can shed new light on the perplexing question based on our own contemporary knowledge and the wisdom and experience that we have acquired from hindsight in their own times. For although the sages of yore were great and inspired, we in our own generation are privy to new understanding to which those great men had no access. In short, we have new evidence. For on that fateful evening of destruction, it is true that the priests and the Levites consoled each other and all of Israel with the knowledge that Elohim will avenge his honor. Perhaps their songs summarize the entire epic. It is certainly possible that they chose to remind the Holy One of his own vow as well. But while all of these explanations are acceptable, it is also quite possible that as the Levites stood atop the platform in that place of sublime inspiration and holiness for the last time, all of a moment they received the most powerful, profound flash of prophetic revelation. And they prophesied, they saw the perfect clarity of vision that although the terrible destruction now loomed all around them on this Saturday evening, the continuation of their service would most certainly come about as well. The day would come when the holy temple could be rebuilt. Though it may be far off in the distance, it would certainly transpire, for it is a divine promise. At that moment they could see that it would truly come to be. The rebuilding would happen, even if it happened very slowly, in stages, one step at a time. For like the morning dawn, such is the way of Israel's redemption. In the beginning, it possesses very slowly, but as it continues, it grows brighter and brighter, says the Jerusalem Talmud, Barchot 1:1. So too the Levites perceived that the long process of Israel's redemption, hinging on the rebuilding of the holy temple, would bring again on a Wednesday. Thus they sang the song of Wednesday, for they sang not of destruction but revenge, but of promise, continuation, renewal, and rebirth. The Levites saw that Jerusalem and the Temple Mount would stand desolate for nearly 2 millennia. But they would be regathered by Israel once again on a Wednesday. Wednesday, June the 7th, 1967 was the day they saw, and perhaps this day could be considered the first step towards the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. For this day marked a turning point in Israelite history and began a new era which progresses in our own time and moves towards the great destiny of the Israelite people to be a light to the nations and a people who walk with Elohim in their midst. One of my teachers, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, during the 6-Day War, when Moshe Dayan was moving his troops throughout the city, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who was the high rabbi of the Israeli forces, seized the opportunity and called for a unit of the Corps of Engineers to meet him on the Temple Mount that had been abandoned by the Arabs. As they marched upwards, he told them to bring their surveying equipment. And he issued an order to those men: find the sinkholes of the temple. Find where the temple originally stood on the mount. He also ordered a guard around the perimeter of the Temple Mount. General Moshe Dayan heard of what Rabbi Shlomo Goren was doing, and he broke from his men and took a small unit up to the Temple Mount, and he ordered Rabbi Shlomo Goren off the mount. It was his intention to give it back to the Arab authorities. Rabbi Shlomo Goren said, "I'll not leave until I finish the mission that Hashem has given me." And he didn't. For several days he stood atop that altar, that mount. It's an altar. And surveyed. And they found the original sinkholes of the temple. So we know where the temple stood. That's no longer a mystery. We know where the new temple has to stand. That's no longer a mystery. And it fulfilled a prophecy in Ezekiel that said that it would stand to the west of the profane place. Now, what's a profane place? A place that's been holy and then defiled. See, most people thought that the temple stood upon the rock where the dome sits. No, it sits to the west of that. The Arabs have defiled that place. That's where the graven altar stood on top. Remember the ramp up to the altar? They had placed the altar atop that rock. Why? Because that was originally where Isaac was offered. So it was a continuation of that. So we don't have to put the altar there again. It was done for symbolism. We can literally build the whole temple without ever touching what the Muslims have up there. We'll just build a high wall. Why is that important? Because in the future, they can exist harmoniously. That shouldn't be a problem for he who will defile the whole Temple Mount, the Mashiach Nagib. Well, next week we'll take up the spiritual significance of the tabernacle. The tabernacle, a tent to live in. Thank you, guys. Well, Do we have any questions before we leave? Any questions? Saw some new information there you were writing down. So there are some things you didn't hear before. How did you enjoy the step by step in a day? First of all, did you know that each service was dictated by a lottery? Did you? Isn't that interesting? I thought it was interesting for myself because, you wonder how do they decide who's going to serve? And naturally, everybody wants to serve. Everybody's called to serve. But there's so many people. There's got to be some kind of way, and it stood to reason a lottery was reasonable. But isn't that interesting? Because then a lottery can be totally manipulated by Yahweh. I mean, if you use the lot of like a dice, a set of dice, well, that can be purely up to Yahweh. He can cause that to lie where he wants it to. So it can't be easily corrupted. At the same time, then, Yahweh can call the same person several times, except for that one service, the incense, which was only for newcomers. Yes. So that they would, when we're talking about defilement, it was defilement from the sacrifices. So those that have been handling blood, when they were leaving the tabernacle, the people needed to know that that's why they were defiled, and that there was no guilt on them, that they had defiled themselves in holy fashion. So you think of defilement as an evil thing, and it's not. For instance, according to Scripture, I defile myself on Sabbath, and all the priests and Levites did, because we work on the Sabbath. But the guilt is shifted off of us and placed upon the tabernacle. So we never have any guilt. We have to work to serve you. But technically, we've defiled the Sabbath. It's just not laid to our account. So it's as though it never happened. You understand? These are all technicalities, but you need to understand defilement doesn't always mean evil or wicked. It is just the course of doing business. Now, certainly you can defile yourself through wickedness and evil, but it's the intent on what you've done. If you assist an injured person, see, this is the story of the Good Samaritan. When the man was on the side of the road bloodied, and you have the Levite and you have a priest heading to the temple to officiate, because he's been selected by lottery, he can't touch that man. Now, it's his responsibility to go for help. We don't know if they did or not. But certainly it's kind of a strange story, because to, say, the Christian, those dirty Jews didn't help one of their own, but a Samaritan did. That's the story we get. But what's being said is, this has nothing to do with helping an injured party, and has everything to do of calling the Samaritan who lived in Samaria. The 10 tribes. Remember? So it's evoking goodness out of the Samaritan towards Judah, his brother. That's what the story's all about. That because Judah is hurting through the occupation of the Romans, that should cause the 10 tribes to come and rescue them. That's what the story's about. It's not the priest's responsibility. It's not the Levite's responsibility. It's the brother's responsibility to take care of the brothers. That's why I'm always telling you, it's your responsibility to evangelize, not mine. My responsibility is you, to service you, so that you can go out and beget sheep. Because you don't, I have to do it. But that's not right. So I do, from time to time, go door knocking when you won't do it. But as of late, people have been really good about bringing visitors through invitation, and some of you by going and picking them up. That's really awesome. It makes my job a lot easier when you don't make me go out and do something that I'm not called to do. I mean, you thought you were just supposed to be sitting here and get fed all the time, not have to do anything? That just makes you fat. I do share too much. You're supposed to eat and then go and work out. Not vainly. Okay, let me put it this way. You know what workout does? Working out in the gym does? That's fake work. That's fake work. If you were working physically, you wouldn't have to do that other stuff. The reason why we do that is because we live in cities and not on farms. We don't do the work we were called to do as people. You know, you didn't see very many fat farmers in the old days. I know. But I am. What I'm saying is that nowadays we have to go to gyms, which were invented by the Greeks, because they began to build cities and no longer lived an agricultural lifestyle. We're called to be agriculturalists. Do you know that? All of the offerings technically are built on an agricultural scale. But because we live in the cities, we have to convert our money for certain offerings and then offer money, because that's all we have to offer, and do fake work to try to burn fat, because we're still eating like we're living on the farm. So that's what I'm saying. Now, in a spiritual vein, what I'm saying is it's my responsibility to feed the sheep, but it's the sheep's responsibility to beget sheep. I'm a shepherd. It's a little strange if I beget sheep. So what do I ended up doing? Spending resources of the fellowship to buy sheep that may or may not stick. You understand? Resources that we could do other things in the fellowship with, I have to buy things, pay for flyers, business cards, and then take time out from Wednesday night to move to Thursday night to have a prophecy seminar to entice them. I don't mind doing it. Don't get me wrong. I don't mind. But that's a secondary job. My main job is you. If you, and I'm not talking about you particularly, I'm talking about the congregation. If the congregation did its job on a great basis, then we wouldn't have to do that. And like I say, as of late, we've been seeing growth. That's generally from people here, bringing other, and it's mainly the new people going out and bringing other new people, like what I've found, And so that's really cool. Tonight's not a good representation of it. The sheep got cold and didn't want to come in. Doesn't make sense. The sheep got cold but didn't want to come in. I guess they're staying in the barn. So, but I thank you guys for coming out. And Regina, because she didn't have any good TV on tonight, so she came. Oh, there you go. We will be having a prophecy seminar soon, by the way. So, and when's my dinner date?
Trying to work it out with my son.
Okay. I won't steal her. Well, then we should have a extra.